Okay, great. And I can just kick us off here. So good evening, everyone. I am not Daniel Weir. I'm Eric Berkey. I am going to be stepping in tonight and chairing this form-based code advisory working group meeting. I think I know a decent number of the folks on the call, maybe not everyone, especially from the work Daniel and I did with this group for the Barcroft working group about a year ago. So Eric Berkey, I live in Douglas Park, proudly, home of Barcroft Apartments, among other things. I am also a member of the Planning Commission, among wearing many other hats. So looking forward to getting to know new folks going forward here as I'm chairing tonight. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and just give a few remarks that you're used to about these virtual meetings. So we're holding tonight's virtual public meeting, which enables remote electronic participation as legally authorized by the Code of Virginia. Members of the Form-Based Code Advisory Working Group are participating virtually through electronic means. So a few things about our virtual environment that I think we all know by this point. But members of the public may attend this meeting electronically using the Microsoft Teams link provided on the Form-Based Code Advisory Working Group webpage, the county's events calendar, and the email notification that was sent to the advisory working group email subscribers. Also, there is a dial-in phone option for those who'd like to use it. For our working group members, if anyone loses internet connectivity tonight, please reconnect with us by phone. Please also keep your phones and devices muted until you're called upon. Please turn off any sound to other devices around you to minimize interference. For virtual attendees using Microsoft Teams, please turn off your video feed. I'll address it in a moment. The meeting chat, the Microsoft Teams meeting chat, it's active for two purposes. One, for anyone who needs technical assistance, and then also for members of the public who would like to add their names to the list for public comment. And we will be taking public comment towards the end of the meeting tonight. The Teams chat should not be used for discussion. Those who want to provide public comment will do so at the end of the meeting, as I said, because we need to make sure that any public comment, really all the comments made during the meeting, are shared verbally so that they can be heard during the recording when anyone wants to listen to it in the future. A couple other things. If you'd like to be recognized to speak on an item during the meeting, please turn on your video feed and then raise your virtual hand in Teams, and we'll be monitoring those feeds. And I think we do a pretty good job here of making sure everybody is able to speak. If you're joining by phone, I'm going to take a look here. I'm not sure if anybody's joining by phone tonight, but if you do have to join by phone, just let us know that you'd like to say something. Again, I think we do. Daniel's done a pretty good job of that as well. And we'll check in to make sure everybody has an opportunity to speak and ask questions. So if you are here to provide public comment, we will allot 2 to 3 minutes, and if there aren't many public commenters, probably 3 towards the end. And so just enter your name in the Microsoft Teams meeting chat, and then Olivia will add your name to the list. Last, again, another friendly reminder, this is a public forum. The meeting is being recorded, will be posted to the county's website, and all information associated with tonight's meeting, whether written or spoken, is subject to Virginia Freedom of Information Act requirements. Excellent. Got through it. Okay, great. So again, like I said, I'm Eric Berkey. I'll be chairing tonight. We've got a couple of things on the agenda. We've got 2 different use permits with regards to Barcroft Apartments. So we'll go through those. We'll have public comment, some development updates, and hopefully get out of here before 9 o'clock. So I think first on the agenda, Olivia, is the Barcroft renovation, the use permits 5 and 6, and there's a staff presentation on that.
Yes, I will go ahead and share my screen. So hopefully everybody can see this. So tonight we'll be reviewing 2 neighborhoods form-based code applications. These are the phases 5 and 6 of the renovation use permits at Barcroft Apartments. Both staff and the applicant have combined these presentations into one just for efficiency's sake. But I'm happy to answer questions on either application after the presentations. So just to give you a sense of where we are, I know you all have seen a number of different renovation use permits at this point. This map on the right shows all of the renovation use permits, some of which have been approved over the past couple years, and some of which are yet to come. So we have, the county board has approved a total of 4 renovation use permits marked as numbers 1 through 4 on the map. We're currently reviewing renovations 5 and 6, and we do anticipate reviewing a final renovation use permit, number 7, sometime this fall. We've also, as of February of this year, the county board approved the first new construction use permit with 110 committed affordable units, noted here as 4320 Columbia Pike. And then we're also, as the second item this evening, going to be reviewing the first market rate construction proposal for 260 units at 4110 Columbia Pike. So this is just to give you an idea of the breakdown between some of the renovation work that we're seeing and some of the new construction affordable units that we'll be looking at. In total, about 960 of the units will be renovated, and then we'll see about the remaining 375 provided in new construction. So this site's within the Columbia Pike corridor, and this is an excerpt of the general land use plan map, and it shows where the revitalization district boundaries are in the black dashed lines here. So you can see the neighborhood's area boundaries are shown. It's hard to see here, but as note 24 and note 24A. So these 2 particular use permit sites are located within note 24A, which is the neighborhood's conservation area. And both of these sites are also are designated on the general land use plan as low medium residential. So both sites are zoned RA 1426. It's a multiple family dwelling district in the Arlington County zoning ordinance, but they're also within the Columbia Pike neighborhoods form-based code boundaries. So the applicant has opted to use the optional zoning tool to pursue a neighborhoods form-based code use permit for these renovations. So this is an excerpt of the central sub-area regulating plan. As you can see here, the majority of the area within the boundaries of these use permits is designated as conservation areas. There is a portion of the site within renovation use permit number 6, which has that blue, that cyan blue area, which designates adjacent to conservation areas. The applicant has opted to preserve an additional building in this location since the designation of these areas earlier this year. And then I'll also note there's a couple locations where we have natural preserve areas in both renovations number 5 and 6. It's hard to see on the screen here, but it's this this darker green outline here, if you can see my cursor, and then another one, a triangular area over here by this building. So I'll give just kind of a snapshot of what's being proposed with these renovation use permits, and then the applicant has a presentation to dive into some of the review process that occurred with the HLRB and the DRC earlier this year, as well as some of the other specifics, photos and architectural changes that are being made. So for renovation 5, we're looking at preservation and renovation of buildings 41, 44, 45, and 46. So 4 buildings total. The unit count is going to remain at 220 units. Of those, about 78 are family-sized units. The applicant's also converting 3 units into type A accessible units. They're proposing 3 private resident amenity areas within this use permit boundary. And again, they have some of the preserved natural areas that are designated on the regulating plan within these boundaries. So they have proposed preservation of those areas and improved additional plantings in those locations. As with all of the other renovation use permits before, they're requesting modifications for existing buildings to remain, to preserve the existing parking that's on site today, and maintain conformity with other zoning ordinance requirements like setbacks. And then for renovation number 6, we're looking at buildings 1 through 11, as well as 2 garages. This unit count is going to increase from 305 to 312 units. So this is the first example that we're seeing of them taking advantage of the ability to increase density on the site. They're able to do this because they're adding family size and type A accessible units. So this is an amendment that the county board approved as part of all of the other the Barcroft amendments earlier this year. So again, we're seeing about 78 family size units realized in this phase of renovations, and then 5 units are going to be type A accessible units. They have 4 private resident amenity areas, again, some of those natural preserved areas, and the modifications for existing buildings to remain, as well as that modification to allow for the increase in the number of units. So the applicant did go to the DRC and the HLRB a couple times. I'll let them talk about the discussion that was had there. The next step for this item will be taking it to the Planning Commission on June 2nd. As with some of the previous use permits, we will be providing just a verbal update to the Housing Commission on this item. And then we anticipate taking both of the items to the county board in June. So with that, I'll invite Miss Riley, I believe, to give the applicant presentation.
Hi, good evening. Thank you, Ms. Sontag, for the detailed overview, and it's in spirit of Mr. Berkey's statement, a goal to get out of here by 9. I'll attempt to be quick. And I know we've got a little bit of overlap here. Thank you for going over the context of where we are in all of Barcroft and where these use permits sit relative to the other ones. So if you all would like to see a different version of Ms. Sontag's earlier phasing slide with different colors, I have this here for you. I won't spend a lot of time on it other than to say, you know, the blue portions are renovation use permits that have already been approved since 2023 up through last year. We made a lot of progress in that time while we were all working to develop the master finance and development plan, and then subsequently work toward the new construction projects here in orange. And then these green, the areas outlined in green, are the 2 phases that we're discussing today, here and here. And then the last and final phase, the final piece of the puzzle for the conservation area building, existing buildings to remain, is likely to come before you all in the fall. And so suffice to say, we've made lots of progress over the past couple of years, and exciting to see these final pieces of the puzzle come together here for the renovation areas. And then apologies, we've switched the orientation on you here, as with many of our presentations, it's just easier to show the full scale of the site here at this orientation. So Columbia Pike is now on your left, and the 2 phases are outlined here in red. And this is a nice color coded diagram that that Trace Rees has put together that we use for the HLRB meetings, but it really helps to show the different phases of Barcroft, these different sections and when buildings were developed. And so why we've kind of lumped all of buildings 1 through 11 into one renovation use permit is because they're all located within the same section. These were some of the first buildings constructed in Barcroft in the early 1940s. And then on the other side, in the second phase, post-war phase of Barcroft, we've grouped together buildings 41, 44, 45, and 46 here into one use permit area. These buildings were constructed later in section 6 and 7 in the late 1940s. And then here's some photos there are a lot of buildings here, so we're not going to provide, go through photos for each of the buildings, but these give you a general character of the existing buildings to remain here in this first section of Barcroft. Lots of mature trees, and some courtyard areas, which we're able to add to create some gathering space for the residents. You can see the details here in this first phase are more ornate for this portion of the project. And then as you move to that second phase renovation use permit, you can see the character of the buildings is a little bit different. We have more buildings here that are painted, that have a different style entrance canopy here. As usual, grade is something we have to contend with on Barcroft, and we also have a lot of instances across both phases where we have these basement level areas where we've been able to convert, as Ms. Sontag noted, we're able to create additional units and accessible units here by kind of utilizing some of this basement space that's storage or used for mechanical purposes, and kind of using that to create units. Here's an overview of the proposed scope of the renovations. These are the fifth and sixth renovations that have come before you all, and they're going to look very similar to the previous ones, where the exterior scope is cleaning the brick, repairing and replacing roofs and fixtures. We're again replacing all of the old heating and air systems in these buildings and adding new equipment with some new penetrations on secondary elevations for that new mechanical equipment. As with previous use permits, we're creating some new amenity areas for residents, and I'll show you some of that in just a moment. And kind of big ticket items here, the creation of 8 accessible units across both of these renovation phases by utilizing existing entrances as well as creating some new entrances. And we're also very excited that we're able to net add 7 units to the phase 5 use permit, that buildings 1 through 11, which is made possible through those text amendments that Ms. Sontag just mentioned. I know that was a big topic of conversation last year, where we wanted to be able to add units and family size units to also facilitate accessible units, and we're now able to do that. So that's really exciting to implement with this project. Another notable point that I think Ms. Sontag noticed, we're able to preserve building 3, which was slated to be in a redevelopment area, as well as preserve building 6, which, if you recall, is part of the master finance and development plan. We were going to partially demolish that and create a resident amenity center there. But now, as we look to the landscape plans, what we're able to do, we are going to provide that resident amenity center in a new building instead of partially demolishing this building 6 here. What we are able to do to create some meaningful outdoor space for residents across Barcroft is we're going to move this sidewalk that today, as you come up South Thomas Street, kind of jogs inward and goes up toward building 6 and then comes back out. We're going to move that sidewalk so it's a little more consistent with the rest of Thomas Street, which allows us to also create more space for this multi-purpose playfield here, as well as here, one of the largest and most flat spaces in Barcroft. We're able to add a playground space for residents. And these 2 items are really the top ticket items that Gyre Lynch heard from residents when they polled them about what amenities they would like to see on the property. So we're very happy to implement that here, as well as those typical gathering spaces here in red that you see that we've been doing with the prior renovation use permits. Moving on to the other phase, on the other side of South Thomas Street there, we've got, again, areas where we're adding some new potential amenity space focused here in these courtyards of the existing buildings to make that space feel a little bit private, screened from the streets and driveways. Here also, what's notable is we're able to implement the biophilic pathway as recommended as part of the master finance and development plan. You all recall The goal there was to utilize the existing pathways and network in Barcroft and enhance that to um, make it more meaningful and provide a biophilic experience for people getting from one site to the other. And so here we're utilizing these existing sidewalks and paths to provide some bollard lighting, some low-level native plantings, benches for moments of pause as people get tired of walking up the stairs and need a minute to rest here on Barcroft. So you can see a bit of that detail here and how it carries forward through through this phase. And I have just a couple of typical elevations. Again, there are many elevations across these two use permits, but these I think illustrate some of the illustrate the proposed exterior renovations. As Ms. Sontag mentioned, we went to the design review committee as well as the Historic Affairs and Landmark Review Board in February and in April to discuss the scope of these renovations. And generally, the members were very supportive of our application, as they have been with prior use permits. They were very excited to see preservation of buildings 3 and building 6, as well as the scope of these exterior renovations. Here in this phase, the main item of concern of note for the HELRB were some areas, as I mentioned, we have these kind of little basement areas with window wells where today that's storage space or that's mechanical space for for um, for the operator. And now we're renovating that. We're turning these into bedrooms to create more family size units or to assist with the creation of accessible units. And so when we do that, we have to then come into building code compliance and provide this pipe railing here to meet current code requirements. It's a little bit different than if you see on below elevation where we have existing pipe railing that's kind of allowed non-conforming to continue, but where we've created these units here, we have to provide a little bit more and what's up to code. So we worked through the design of that with the HLRB to get them comfortable with the proposed pipe railing here and the larger windows on those basement units. And on this next phase, we had similar conditions here as the previous ones. And this elevation allows you to see a little bit of the different architectural character in this phase with the doors and the door surrounds less ornate, the unique canopies that appear here in the buildings in phase in this phase 2 part of Barcroft. And then moving on to our modifications. So very similar to previous projects where we're able to create an accessible unit, but we need to punch through a new entrance, always on a secondary facade elevation. Virginia Housing requires that that door be fiberglass as opposed to what's required in the conservation area, wood or metal. So again, we're requesting that modification here to allow for those new doors to comply with Virginia Housing requirements. Similarly, Virginia Housing also requires canopies over new entrances and over the new accessible entrances. So we propose to keep these over the new accessible entrances that are exterior. This provides some comfort, a reprieve from inclement weather when folks are coming into their unit here. And then again, here is just a summary of our application overview. So we have 2 form-based code use permits to allow the renovation of those existing buildings to remain, with modifications of form-based code standards to allow for more density to create those accessible units and additional family size units, as well as those modifications for the conservation area standards that I mentioned, as well as the setbacks and parking that Ms. Sontag mentioned. All very similar in scope to what you've seen before. And with that, our presentation is concluded. We've also got our members of our design team here, as well as Jerry Lynch, if anyone has any questions. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Lauren. Okay. Well, at this point, we will open up discussion to the working group. If folks have questions or comments, Linda, go ahead.
Thank you. The applicant's presentation, there's mislabeling of what is part of renovation 5 and what is part of renovation 6 on multiple slides. It looks like it just somehow got reversed, where items that are labeled as part of number 5 are actually 6, and items labeled as 6 are actually part of 5. And it happens on slides 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So it's just a consistent reversal of the labeling of what's 5 and what is 6.
Hi, Linda. Thanks for that note. I had just realized that today we had been using phase 5 for the buildings 1 through 11, and phase 6 for the latter buildings, just in our internal planning. And I think the order in which they were filed was actually reversed. So to your point, that naming is off. I did just realize that today.
Okay.
I'm going to update that in our presentation materials going forward. So I will fix that. But the boundaries themselves are correct in terms of the two different sets of the use permits between mine and staff's presentation.
Yep. What you just said makes a lot of sense. It looked like it was very consistently one was the other. So at least that for what I could see, it was completely consistent one way or the other. So great.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I'm sorry about that. We didn't catch that until recently. We'll fix it.
I have a couple things. Nothing big, I don't think. I definitely appreciate the enhanced spaces. That's good to see. That was some of the feedback we heard as well, was concerned about those spaces. And you're right, there's not much flat area in that part of the property. So I think that's great to try to take advantage of that. Am I correct in saying, aside from the new units that are being created in those lower spaces, the unit mix itself, that's not really changing, right? Because it's a renovation. Like, there aren't really any one bedrooms becoming two bedrooms, for example. Can you walk me through that? Like, it's pretty much
Sure.
the same, right?
I would say generally it's pretty close to what it is today. The changes that you see are where we're converting maybe a 1 bedroom or 2 bedroom into an accessible unit, or to a 3 bedroom unit. In some cases, we're able to create a 4 bedroom
Sure.
unit as well. And so that's where the unit mix is changing. And, primarily we're able to do this through revising layouts, but mainly we're able to do this through utilizing the basement level space, kind of
Right.
creating new bedrooms and new units there. So we have made strides in creating more family sized units and accessible units, but overall, yes, you do see much more 1 bedrooms, and a little bit of 2 bedrooms is consistent with, the rest of the buildings across the site.
Yeah, and to make like a completely obvious point, probably, but I think it's worth saying out loud, is these are renovations, right? Like Jair
Mhm.
Lynch is doing new construction, but there's a lot of renovation work that was always contemplated for many years now in this. And so I think there's always interest in, bigger, having more units, right? The 3 bedrooms, we hear
Mhm.
that at Planning Commission a lot, Housing Commission, like a lot of folks in the community will say that. I think that's appreciated. I know I appreciate that and share that sentiment. But on the other hand, like, this is a renovation. So, the applicant here is fairly, constrained, right? Because that was the whole point, is renovating existing buildings. And so there's only so much modification you can do with things like layouts and the guts of the building. And it's not a bad thing. It's a choice, right? It's preservation means preserving materials, preserving the buildings, putting money into that versus tearing everything down, going through a much more complicated financial scheme, right, to build new. I'm just saying, and you know all this, but I'm just saying this out loud because I think it's important to kind of note that, right? That's the choice we've made here. And then we all new buildings too, and those are still difficult to build too and have their own constraints. But obviously, you can put walls in different places in new buildings and so forth. So anyway, you don't have to respond to that. I'm just saying that out loud because I know a lot of folks will say, "Gosh, that's a lot. There's a lot of one bedrooms. Where are all the 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms?" And it's like, I think Giant Lynch has sort of done what it can, to the extent of what's possible here with the existing buildings, right? And part of that also was, preserving residents and their ability to stay. So anyway, I have one more question, which was, I brought up the lighting, and Lauren, you talked a little bit about lighting on I think the pathway, but can you speak to again? Any enhancements to lighting? Because you've heard me say this, but that was raised consistently throughout the whole planning process, was concerns about lack of lighting, like in the evening.
Right. You're exactly right. We've heard that. And I believe early on, Gyro Lynch also did a lighting study across the property as well. And so I might need some help from Jeff Krebs with or Greg or Gyro Lynch on this. But I believe when it comes to lighting, we are, replacing or adding lighting in the renovation areas, but we have to be strategic about how we do that so as not to interfere with the mature tree canopy that we have on the site. But yes, the goal is to enhance the lighting situation. And Jeff, do you want to add on to that?
Sure, you covered it very well. I think the
Yeah.
the metric that we're held to is Virginia housing standards, and so they have a requirement for a photometric requirement for the parking lots and also for the building entries. And so the primary emphasis on upgrading the lighting is for those sort of public areas, if you will. So the parking lots throughout the renovation areas would be upgraded to this new standard, and the building mounted the sconces at the building entries are going to be upgraded as well. The other element that the small or existing ornamental fixtures around the site that are kind of pedestrian oriented would remain, and have their bulbs replaced, things sort of fixed up so that it's all working. And then the last element is, as Ms. Riley talked about, along the biophilic pathway, the intent is to have it would be fairly infrequent, but low, very small marker lighting along that pathway so that you can sort of see how to get from point A to point B clearly. And then I guess I should say then the final sort of element is revisiting Thomas Street, which is a work in progress at this point, but all of which the goals of all of those things is to increase the sort of the safety factor on the project.
Yeah, I think look, and I'm going to open up to the rest of the group here. I love this project. Like, I've made no secret of this. I'm been excited for years about all this. I think it's great. You're all moving forward. So I've one kind of piece of constructive feedback, but don't get me wrong. I love 99% of this project. I'm so excited about it. I think one thing that I would really urge us to continue to think about and maybe iterate is sort of the right way to think about this is that lighting. And I'm Jeff, I'm so glad to hear you talk about the pathways and all that. But maybe consider, as you're actually going through the renovations, and I know you started some of them already, to kind of revisit that conversation at some point, because it's such a big property. Parking is such an issue. I know it's a concern of the residents, right? Not just during construction, but later on. And we're absolutely going to have situations where sometimes somebody has to park down near 4 Mile, or park somewhere that's maybe not as convenient if they're parking on one of the streets because they're not in one of the new builds, and they're kind of walking up a pathway. They got to go up somewhere else. It's a big property. There's lots of hills. There's a lot of nooks. I mean, it's a very cool property, right? There's a lot of nature. There's a lot of nooks. There's a lot of corners and stuff. And I don't think it's reasonable to expect every part of that gets lit at night. I don't think that's it. But I do think that there is a lot of middle ground there where folks do feel sort of concerned about, they're not necessarily in a parking lot, but are they on that path, or are they in a different part of the property that maybe not as well lit? And maybe it's fall and it's after dusk, and there are safety concerns, right? They're right off 4 Mile. I'm not suggesting it's anything nefarious, but that's something I just consistently heard, right? It was like, I don't feel safe. We used to have more Arlington cops live here. We don't. The lighting's not great, especially in the fall months. So it's not a specific ask other than, can you guys just continue to think about this as you build it out? Because maybe there's some like lower cost solutions to add some lighting in different places that maybe we're just not thinking about. But once this gets built out a little bit more and we see where people are parking now, when things kind of change a little bit, maybe that will kind of present itself to say, actually, we're going to do this and this and this, which maybe don't cost much money, but maybe have an impact for residents. So I'm really just asking for a commitment to kind of revisit the lighting conversation, as we go through this process. I see Ed has his hand up. Go ahead, Ed.
Yes, good evening, everybody. And Lauren, thank you for the presentation. And you handled that very well, that there was some of the naming was in reverse, and you handled that very deftly. It could happen to anyone. But of course, it's Linda who saw it, eagle-eyed Linda, she saw it. Congratulations, Linda.
She helped me out, Ed, before we go to planning commission. I'll get that fixed. That was one of the things where we're all juggling these different use permits and didn't realize staff had a different order than we had.
Yes. Oh, and I did appreciate when the one graphic, when you turned the orientation of the map, suddenly it made a whole lot more sense when you did that in terms of my orientation along 4 Mile Run. But anyway, so that was helpful. I do want to mention that I'm thrilled that there's going to be a 4-bedroom unit. Is there any other 4-bedroom unit in affordable housing in Arlington? Probably they're very, very rare. But that's wonderful that a family will be able to be accommodated, a larger family. I was thrilled to hear about the playground. That's going to be great. Also, I like the idea that the developer has found a way to incorporate some of the livable space that's on a basement level, but does have sufficient natural lighting or daylight. I think that's very constructive to make use of that space. I presume that in apartments like that, you've had to add a stairwell inside the unit or something, but of course that eats up some space, but that's life. But I do have one comment. I was wondering, of the units that have already been renovated and where families have moved in, do we have any feedback from them as to the things that they do like about their apartments as renovated, or if there's some things that they would make any suggestions for future units? And those are my comments.
Thank you for those comments. We appreciate that. On the 4-bedroom unit question, I won't speak as to what's available in Arlington, but I do remember, if you recall, our first renovation use permit where we had some of those bump outs to create additional bedrooms. I think that was the first time Arlington had seen introduction of a 4-bedroom unit in a very, very long time. I'd have to go consult Lauren Ferris with historic preservation because she had some data on that. So we are of course very happy to provide those where we can. And then I'm sorry, what was your last question?
Well, my
Again,
main
it was about
of the units that are occupied already, the renovated units that have been occupied.
Oh, yes.
Is there any feedback from those residents of what they do like, or if there are any concerns or whatever?
I don't think we have feedback just yet. Our first renovation is still underway. There's been a little bit of a delay with that because that area was where the slope failure had occurred. So there's a lot of site work that Gyre Lynch needed to do to get out there and repair that area and then begin the renovation process. So we haven't yet had folks move into newly renovated units yet, but when we do, we hope to get some feedback from them, and we hope that'll be a much better experience than they have today, with where they have upgraded appliances and fixtures, and they have in-unit washer dryers. Those are going to be all amenities that they get to experience once they move into their renovated unit. But we'll keep a lookout for that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Lauren.
Thanks, Ed. Do other folks have questions or comments regarding permits for areas 5 and 6? Ed, do you have another question, or was that from before?
I'm sorry, that's from before. I thought I took down my hand. All right, sorry about that.
No worries. All right, well, going once, Going twice. All right. Well, thanks for the presentation on those use permits. So I think that was a healthy conversation, and we will move along and talk about, I will call it 4110. Well, that's what I'm going to call it. I commit to that. The 4110 Columbia Pike Neighborhoods Form-Based Code Use Permit. Take it away, Olivia.
All right, thank you very much. So same pattern here. We'll start with the staff presentation. This one will be brief and reserve most of the time for the applicant. So this is another neighborhoods form-based code use permit for the second new construction project at Barcroft. This one will be market rate construction, and we'll talk a little bit more in a minute about what that means. So before we dive into some of the content, I just want to highlight that this use permit going to the board in July is being considered concurrent with a zoning ordinance amendment to the neighborhoods form-based code to introduce a phased development use permit mechanism to help track commitments across the Barcroft Apartments property. And then it'll also include the actual phase development use permit application, which is going to spell out how all of those commitments are being satisfied and the phasing plan. So all three of those items are tracking to be considered by the county board in July. For the amendments themselves, you all heard this item at your meeting last month. We took the amendments to the zoning committee of the Planning Commission last night. And then the request to advertise for these amendments will go to the county board in June. And then for the phase development use permit application itself, that will come to the advisory working group next month for review. And then again, all three items will go to the board in July. So the this use permit that we'll be covering here does rely upon the approval of the amendments and the, we're calling it the PDUP application itself to fulfill all of its affordable housing requirements offsite, which will be in all of the renovation areas. So it gives it the ability to point to the renovations, the renovation use permits that have been approved to satisfy those requirements. So to start us off, so here we are at the Columbia Pike corridor. This is the general land use plan map. Again, you can see the black dashed lines here are the revitalization district boundaries. The neighborhoods areas again are in notes 24 and 24A. And then the commercial areas are within note 8. So this site previously was within the commercial code, and as part of the amendments that the board adopted earlier this year, this site has now been pulled into the neighborhoods areas. So again, all of Barcroft is now within the neighborhoods form-based code and can be kind of reviewed in a unified fashion. It is within the general land use plan designation of service commercial. Yeah, I think that's all we have for that one. All right, so on to the central sub-area regulating plan. You can see the site here. This orientation is generally north. So we have Columbia Pike on the top here, George Mason Drive running along the western edge, and then 12th Road South runs along the southern portion of the property. So on Columbia Pike and George Mason, we have the urban mixed use designation. And then on the southern side, we have the urban residential BES designation along 12th Road South. So as you can see here, we have that purple hatching. So for this designation, this allows for up to 6 stories, but the purple hatching allows for 2 additional stories, which the applicant is proposing with this application. And then you can also see on the corner here of Columbia Pike and South George Mason Drive, a designated mini park on the regulating plan. So they'll also be delivering that as part of this proposal. So I'll quickly touch on the cross sections. These will look familiar because you all reviewed these as part of the amendments that the county board adopted earlier this year. There are 3 different cross sections along Columbia Pike, South George Mason Drive, and 12th Road South that prescribe the streetscape frontages for all of these sites. So on Columbia Pike, you can see the note here about the Barcroft frontage. So we're going to see a 4-foot dooryard and a 10-foot clear sidewalk and a combined parking and street tree lane. On Columbia Pike, the majority of the frontage is occupied by a transit stop. So we won't see full street trees along that portion because of the transit stop being there. And then along South George Mason Drive, again, you can see on the Barcroft and the park frontage site, we have another 4-foot dooryard, and this is where that shared use trail will be located, 12 feet wide. We have a designated street tree zone in that location, on-street parking, and then the remaining. And then on 12th Road South, so here on the left-hand side is the Barcroft frontage. So it'll deliver that 4-foot dooryard, a 6-foot sidewalk. In this case, they're going to just plant a street tree zone on this portion. There will be no on-street parking. And then they're going to deliver just to the edge of the second travel lane. The existing property line for the park ends at about the end of that travel lane. And there's a park planning process for Doctors Run Park underway right now, which will determine what occurs on the other side of that street. So again, I'll just give a quick overview of the development, and then we'll go to the applicant for the prettier pictures. So they're proposing to demolish some of the existing commercial buildings on the site. There's a 7-Eleven building and a Penske truck rental that exists there today. And then they're proposing to construct an 8-story mixed-use building. It'll have about 7,200 square feet of ground floor retail and 260 units. They'll have vehicle parking, 301 vehicle parking spaces and a partly above grade garage, and then 118 bicycle parking spaces. They've got their private open space of about 8,700 square feet provided on upper level courtyards. And then again, they're proposing to deliver about a 1,200 square foot mini park on the corner of Columbia Pike and South George Mason Drive. As part of the amendment and an MFDP review process earlier this year, the applicant has committed to doing an online engagement process to hear some feedback from the community on that proposal. And that online engagement process is going to be taking place in June. So we'll get to hear a little bit more about that. And the applicant will talk a little bit more about the design proposal for that mini park this evening and the breakdown of the landscaped and hardscaped areas proposed for the park. They are proposing to meet Earthcraft Gold. These are part of our updated green building requirements that the board adopted a year or so ago. And then for the requested modifications, the applicant will show a little bit more information about where some of these modifications are being requested. But as is common with some of these projects that have topography across the site, they're requesting a modification for the height of the first floor relative to the fronting sidewalk elevation. And this is, that says the wrong thing, but this is along a portion of South George Mason Drive. And then they'll also need some relief for the landscape standards for street tree spacing, I believe just on 12th Road and possibly on Columbia Pike. And then in order to, again, meet those, the offsite affordable housing requirements, they will be requesting a modification to provide those as part of the phase development use permit tool. So this application was originally submitted in February, and we've gone through 3 rounds of review with the applicant. The community meeting was held this past Monday, and I'll let the applicant talk about that in just a moment. Again, that mini park engagement process is anticipated to occur in June. And then we plan to take this item to the Planning Commission in July and the County Board in July. So I will stop there and I believe invite Ms. Riley to present again.
All right,
Tag
thank you. round two.
Round two.
And I'm excited to present new construction project for you all tonight. As I mentioned before, Lauren Riley with Walsh Colucci, we represent Gyre Lynch Real Estate Partners. We've got members from the project team here tonight, and as you'll see in just a moment, I'll go over a couple of contextual elements in the project overview and statistics for you, and then I'm going to hand it off to Dan Averitt with Parker Rodriguez to walk you through the mini park design, and then to Chris Gordon with KGD Architecture to walk you through the architecture of the building. And we've also got our civil engineer, Jeff Krebs, and our traffic consultant, Mike Pinkoski, here as well, if we have any questions as we go forward. All right. Just to provide a little context about where we are generally and within Barcroft, the site here is outlined in red. To the south of us is Doctors Run Park. We've got the Quebec Apartments here to our east. To the north, you've got the Liberty gas station and this single-story retail building. Across, catty corner from us across Columbia Pike is the Centro development, one of the first neighborhood form-based code developments, also with a public park there at the corner. So I think what you'll see in our mini park plans is that these two are talking to each other nicely and connecting to a larger park network in the area. And then on the west side of South George Mason Drive, this is where we have existing Barcroft garden style apartments. These are in the future future area for new development. And zooming into the regulating plan with the newest updates after the MFDP and the text amendment adoptions, you can see the site here outlined in red again with this mini park here that's envisioned to be about 0.3 acres, and then the RBL kind of setting the building. And what you'll notice here is we're quite constrained on this site, just in terms of dimensions. It's quite a narrow site, and we have the park space to provide here as well. So those are things that we're balancing as we craft a development program here. Just to show you a couple of photos, even since we started this application process, the county has completed its multimodal improvements along Columbia Pike on this frontage. So we've got some new photos for here to show the updated condition. You can see this nice new wide sidewalk in front of the building here looking east down Columbia Pike. To the right is the 4110 Columbia Pike property. You can see the old Penske truck rental building, as Ms. Sontag mentioned. There's also a 7-Eleven and surface parking on this site. Looks like some of it was used for staging as well for these improvements. So we are very excited to turn this kind of commercial industrial site into an urban residential building to address the street and these new improvements here. Another constraint as we look at this site is that with those multimodal improvements, the county also installed some mechanical equipment here at the corner of Columbia Pike and George Mason. So we have a transformer here, and I think we can see in some photos as we move down closer. Now we're at the intersection of Columbia Pike looking west. Centro is here on your right. Our site is here on your left. You can get a better view of this above ground mechanical equipment here. And then here on the right as you're looking in the opposite direction up toward South George Mason Drive. We're working to address that in the mini park design. And then here's a view from catty corner if you were standing over in the Centro Park looking toward our site. Something you can see here is the grade about how we're even here. And then as you go down South George Mason Drive, that's going to fall. And I'll let Chris Gordon talk a little bit about that, where we have our modifications. And then on the right, it's an image of Doctors Run Park Trail. Mr. Averett will go through, how this is an inspiration for our mini park design, it being so close to the project site. Then here's a rendered image of the proposed site plan, and I'll walk through the proposal here. It'll be a 7-story building. In terms of units, it'd be about 260 units with a mix of 44 studios, 147 one-bedroom units, 63 two-bedroom units, and 6 three-bedroom units in the building. For site access, vehicular residents will enter the parking garage off 12th Road South here, where it says garage access. There's also residential loading access here where this car is, and a secondary lobby on that frontage. We will also have some retail space here at the corner of Columbia Pike and South George Mason Drive. And for the retail space, we have their loading here off of Columbia Pike in a very similar location as the existing curb cut. As Ms. Sontag noted, we'll be delivering that upgraded streetscape that we all reviewed during the Master Finance Development Plan and form-based code text amendments. We're providing that along South George Mason Drive and Columbia Pike. We'll also be providing some on-street parking, some pickup and drop-off space here, some dedicated on-street spaces here and here along Columbia Pike. In this view too, you can see the Columbia Pike bus stop here that was just installed, as well as the new bus shelter. We will be keeping that in place as it is. We'll also be providing a bus pad and sign here for the South George Mason Drive bus stop. And then the mini park here is outlined in green. It's about 0.28 acres. And I'll let Mr. Averett go through the design of this and how it will relate to the proposed building. In terms of modifications of the form-based code, we do have a few here, as Ms. Sontag went through a couple of them. One of them, as you also saw with our first new construction project, is for the building footprint to be larger than the maximum 25,000 square feet. As I noted earlier, this site's quite narrow and constrained. We're proposing a larger building footprint of about 47,000 square feet that will be broken up by the massing. Additionally, with the grade change drop from Columbia Pike down to 12th Road South, there are certain areas where we're not able to provide the required door spacing out from the units for this portion of South George Mason Drive, kind of from about here onward. In some areas, there could be a difference of 12 feet in grade between the finished floor elevation of the unit and the ground floor outside of that. So we're not able to provide doors out onto these spaces. Additionally, because of the varying grade, we need a modification of the requirement for the finished floor to be within 3 feet or to be a minimum above 3 feet of the average sidewalk elevation for this portion of the facade. Additionally, we do have some modifications for street tree spacing, and that's mainly to accommodate, we have some utilities running under here in South George Mason Drive, a bus stop here in Columbia Pike. So those are some areas where we need to modify those requirements, but we have been able to provide as many street trees, as many park trees as we can to really make this streetscape feel like as envisioned in the Master Finance and Development Plan and the updated Columbia Pike form-based code amendments. And Ms. Sontag did also mention our community meeting. Typically with all of these projects, we do set up a community meeting and invite folks from Civic Association and the neighbors. We had scheduled that for Monday. No one attended that meeting. It was not well attended, so we will just be reaching out to the Quebec Apartments again, just to make sure that they received our invitation and follow up with them. And then of course we have Douglas Park Civic Association members here tonight. If anybody would like a follow-up meeting, we're happy to accommodate that. Or I'm hopeful that just meant everyone liked our plan and was fine with it. So we'll continue to engage with the community through through this meeting and the online engagement process for the mini park, which is going to come in the next month or so, as Mrs. Sontag noted. Okay, with that, I'm going to now hand it off to Dan Averett with Parker Rodriguez to walk you through the mini park design here.
Hi everyone, Dan Averett with Parker Rodriguez. Obviously been working on this to make it really an engaging space. And what we did is we kind of looked at the context. So when we look around off of Columbia Pike and George Mason from that intersection, Alcova Heights Park is to the north or to the left here, with Doctors Run Park to the south. We have Randolph Elementary School to the east, Page north, and then the Barcroft community to the west or Plan south. And I really think that the mini park here is an opportunity to bring all of that together and become kind of a real social node within the larger park system. So with that kind of in mind, we kind of sought to find inspiration of what the park could be. And we're inspired by, where the Virginia Piedmont with the Blue Ridge Mountain meets the coastal plain. It's characterized by, these rock outcroppings that you see in Alcova Heights Park. You see it in the Doctor's Run as it runs down this kind of characteristic. And it's, it's very prevalent in our region right here, such as the Great Falls, is probably the boldest expression of that. But we wanted to use that through this mini park to tie this larger park system together as it runs, kind of north-south or from Alcova Heights Park down through Doctors Branch Park. We also think it's an opportunity to really create a node on this urban intersection. There's obviously some challenges to this intersection with the utilities that are there. Kind of the large bus stop that occupies, the mini park frontage along Columbia Pike. But we also see it's also that opportunity to, form a gathering point for kind of friends and neighbors within, the larger community. So we took that as a challenge. But it's also, it being an important intersection for both Metro buses and ART buses. We wanted to really integrate that because some of the best bus stops are actually just places within the city, not just a shelter. So we saw this as an opportunity to become, kind of a nice transit hub. You could get a coffee or, something from a local restaurant, see when your bus is coming with the way, transit works today, and you'd be able to watch times and be able to kind of casually stroll onto a bus. We really see it as a really civilized space that is community engaging, but also serves as a nice transit hub. The plaza to the north or to the left is obviously defined by Columbia Pike and the bus shelter. And what we've done is we wanted to create a seating opportunity there that allowed people to wait for the bus, but also became a transition into the plaza. We've created this tiered seat wall, and that it actually becomes like stepped seating as it steps up to Columbia Pike. One thing at the retail, we climb about 4 feet up to the corner of Columbia Pike and George Mason Drive. There's quite a bit of grade drop or grade rise in there. And what we have a stair that kind of allows you to quickly come down into the plaza, and then ADA access and sidewalk access provided at the retail plaza. The corner of the retail really, I think, defines this edge of the plaza. And so we kind of saw that as a more hard edge, an urban edge, conducive to outdoor retail, and restaurants and cafes. And then as you move kind of further down, the primary building entrance is located along there, as well as access to parking. So as part of the form-based code, we wanted to really express that walk that is parallel to the building as defined by the code. And then as you move towards George Mason Drive, we start to get more of a softer park or green plaza, as is called out as this mini park. And then we're taking up some grade with those boulders that you see as expressed kind of in this the Piedmont, where you get this outcrop into boulders. That allows us to take up grade, allows us to kind of enclose that space and make it feel like an engaging space within the overall community.
And another thing too, sorry to interrupt, Dan, I'll note before we move on to the next slide, is that Dan and his team at Parker Rodriguez designed this park also in relation to the form-based code requirements. So the form-based code, as you all know, can be very prescriptive as it relates to building design and streetscapes, and it's no different when it comes to the public parks. It requires a certain amount of landscaped pervious area to impervious, a certain amount of that has to be vegetated. It controls how many benches and seats that you need to have and where your waste receptacles need to go, what amenities can and should be provided in the park. And so we've all used that as part of our design guide here. We are complying with those requirements of the form-based code as well. This shade structure here is our park amenity, and as you can see, we have seating throughout, and our percentages of pervious to impervious exceeds the requirement of the form-based code in terms of how much landscape space that you have to have. So we've been able to meet all those requirements while also implementing the design influences that Dan talked about.
Yeah, so we're required to have 50% unpaved surfaces. We're at 42% impervious, and we're at 25% of the park needs to be vegetated. We're currently at 45% of the park as a vegetated park. We also have required to have 2 bike racks within the park, 2 seating areas / benches, 2 trash recycling receptacles, park signage, and then the shade canopy as part of our amenity, as Lauren alluded to. The precedent images kind of were inspiring in that they have that kind of that rock outcrop feel with the green behind it. So it's kind of expressing that Piedmont concept, using the planting to kind of encircle the park, make it feel like a green mini park. And then some of the other imagery is, it gets to what we're trying to create as this plaza as a real community gathering space. Kind of that middle image, you can see the tiered seating that we're proposing along Columbia Pike. It'll allow people to kind of, wait for the bus facing Columbia Pike, but also form kind of this tiered seating that looks into the park for, small gatherings, maybe even a small, entertainment space. There's a view from the corner of the retail. You can see in the graphic in the upper right, looking into the park. The retail cafe seating is part, on the left. The bus seating, tiered seating would be on the right. And they really tried to, create a softer plaza. There's so much paving at this intersection, just given the size of Columbia Pike and George Mason Drive. We really wanted to kind of shelter this space. You can see as part of that kind of that screening for the transformers, we kind of wanted to make that really soft and go into the planting. We think that was kind of the best strategy to make that go away and really focus on the actual park itself. One thing that's kind of nice is the shelter within the park forms a nice edge, and we think it forms a nice enclosure to that space. And you can see how the boulders on the left begin to take up that grade up to George Mason Drive and Columbia Pike, and really, creates this into a soft park. We're using more of impervious surfaces kind of in the central part of the park. You can see in the plan in the upper right, this is kind of this little shady tree grove. We do have a lot of utilities that run through this park, and we've carefully danced the trees through this and allowed us to kind of fit the required tree canopy within the overall park itself. And then this is out on South George Mason Drive, looking into the park from there. Creates a nice soft green edge. And then these openings that we do have into the mini park kind of, allow you to kind of leave George Mason Drive and get into this little oasis as you move through the mini park.
All right, thanks, Dan. I'll now call it to the plate. Chris Gordon with KGD Architecture, if you want to walk us through the design here, Chris.
Sure. Good evening, everyone, and thank you, Ms. Riley. I'm going to go. I have quite a lot of slides to go through here, so I'll try and go through pretty quickly on this. We can certainly go back with questions and more detail. This is the first, or I should say, the ground floor composite. What we're representing here are two actual floors. Since there's a considerable grade coming off of Columbia Pike on the page left, down towards the new 12th Street, and we're just showing a composite of how the project meets the ground and what those functions are when they meet the grade. As you can see on the Columbia Pike side, we have a retail component there with back of house areas behind that, and then access to trash and loading through that alleyway that's covered from the building up above. Then the lobby and amenity spaces, quick access to the bike room off of that interior lobby space on the backside. The little triangles designate entrances and egresses through the building itself, pedestrian access. So you can see where the lobby is, and then where the arrow is right now, that's going to be a retail lobby for the elevator for accessibility to the parking inside the building. The gray areas are the parking garage. The lavender areas are the residential units. The pink areas are the back of house areas, and the yellow is the retail. Moving down through the park area, as we had talked about could you just go back to, sorry, Lauren? Yeah. You can see the grade and the rest of it as it goes across where the residential project is. It kinks the building to meet the setback requirements down toward as it comes down to George Mason Drive. And then the lowest portion of it, which is facing the park itself, we're putting a lot of the back of house equipment and access in a second trash and loading area back there for residential access. We wanted to make sure that the retail was successful, so we kept another loading area up towards the George Mason spot itself. That zigzag line is the separation between the two floors. Next, this is the lowest level as discussed. You kind of saw that on that last plan. Then moving up to the next level is where the lobby, retail, and the rest of it are occurring. It's about 12 feet, I think, of drop going from George Mason down to 12th Street. The next, moving up through the building, then you're starting to get a little bit more retail. We have taller spaces as required by the form-based code for the retail areas. So there is the ability of creating an amenity space or a sort of a mezzanine area, which is in that light blue area. And there'll be kind of a quality space to look down onto the lobby space below. Going up to the next. This is the first full level of residential with the garage on the back side of the project. And you're seeing the first of three courtyards that are facing the eastern edge of the building. Going up. Again, it's very similar to the last level. Next level. Now you see that on top of the parking garage, we have two more courtyards. There'll be green areas. One's going to be much more dynamic with a pool on the middle one where the arrow is, and then a more contemplative one and a quieter zone on that side. And if there are questions about those, Dan could fill you in with answers on the designs for each of those. You can see we've taken a lot of care just in the plan itself for articulating the facade throughout the building as prescribed by the form-based code, but even more so just to enhance the architecture. Go on up. This is the first real full level, with you can see too the courtyard spaces and then the peninsulas of buildings coming. We chose to have the massing breakdown on this portion of the building and enhance light and air to the units. On up. The building's broken up into it's one building, but it's from a building classification, it's actually two buildings. And you can see we begin to use the terracing and the 5-foot step back that's required in the form-based code on this upper level. Going up to the next one. And then you'll see as the grade increases towards Columbia Pike, we also introduced the terraces along that facade. We did chose to show one portion that is consistent, and you'll see that in the perspectives at the end of this presentation as an architectural feature. The roof plan, very sexy, very good looking. But you'll see the mechanical penthouse, and you'll see how that is being used as a signature. Different from a lot of buildings on Columbia Pike with it meet the street. This is a building very similar to Centro across the caddy corner, that the main entrance is actually off the park. So we felt that it's very important to have some, broad shoulders or at least enhanced massing in that spot so that it's clear where the residential where the residential entrance is. Also, it's going to be competing with a lot of other components, including the retail and a fabulously designed park on the corner. Beginning to move around the building, and these are the elevation, the primary elevation along Columbia Pike. You can see here it's predominantly brick with a cementitious panel. It's consistent with a lot of the projects along Columbia Pike. The gray, darker gray, is a cementitious panel, and then the sort of rust color is a brick, and then the lighter color is also a brick. Then down towards the base of the building, you'll see the retail spaces that are quite tall as it meets the grade. The next facade going down, this is the park facade. You can see that element I was talking about in the middle, the gray element there, and then the penthouse screening. We've tied that into the fenestration, so it goes all the way down and meets the street. That also denotes the entrance to the retail parking entrance at that side. We've also followed the form-based code in terms of breaking down the massing using various materials in sections of the building to break it down so that it diminishes the massing as you follow along on. It doesn't look like one building, it looks like several buildings on this elevation, including bay windows. Going down to the 12th Street side, or I'm sorry, this is the Kink side, the George Mason. There's a break in the building, as you can see in the key plan, and then it's consistent with breaking down the massing again with using reliefs on the fenestration and changes in the brick material. Then the 12th Street facade. This is where the lower level has most of the trash and loading and some of the services along this side. But the residential will have the residential units in this location will have some great views. You can see some of the parking garage in the backdrop and the rest of the massing of the building above. This is the eastern elevation. The garage is in the rust color. We've broken down the massing on this side through variations in color and textures in the materials, on cementitious materials, which you're not seeing on this facade. I don't know why this slide is in this presentation. There's no shadows on this. Each of the lighter gray elements are quite deep. So what you're not seeing here is that this is not a continuous facade. It's got quite a lot of depth to it going back. We also are proposing on that facade to keep the garage as a solid material instead of a screening material, so that it doesn't at night, light and views into that garage won't affect the adjacent property. We do have the alleyway there with architectural screening on it to also provide a barrier. Next. These are close-ups of the ground floor plane, Columbia Pike entrance, where the retail is and where the building meets the street. Rolling around to the bottom one, which is also turning the corner, and that'll be facing the park. You can see the entrance on the right-hand side, and you'll see in the perspective a little bit more detail, and then the retail entrance on the other. That's actually a 2-story lobby space, so we think it'll be very dynamic on the park and also from George Mason Drive. A better view of this is this perspective. It kind of puts it all into play here. This is a view looking at the park, the Columbia Pike side, and then the building as it rolls back. You can see that architectural element and the attempt to create a massing element and a focal point for the main entrance there. We also have blade signs that denote that as well. We have a few balconies that face the park because we think that'll be pretty nice to enjoy. Next. A close-up the retail portion. So Columbia Pike is to the left of the page. Coming down, you can see some of what Dan Averett was talking about with the landscaping. We feel like it's got a lot of biophilic feelings about it and has a lot of articulation. The retail lobby, the retail elevator lobby is on the right-hand side, and then the reddish colored canopy element is the entrance to the residential lobby.
Yeah, I think that's all.
Thank you.
Chris, is there anything else?
That's it. Yes. If there are questions, we can certainly answer.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much. So we'll open it up to questions. Ed, go ahead.
Yes, first of all, thank you very much for the presentation. I really enjoyed it. I did want a clarification for the recording. When staff was giving an overview, they mentioned 1,200 square feet for the mini park, but I believe it's 12,283 square feet for the mini park. If we could just get that clarified. Also, I do want to mention in terms of the mini park, I really like the idea of the tiered beat wall. That sounds like a great way to tackle that idea of the change in grade, and also a place for people to gather and to sit and relax. Then also on the 12th Street side of the building, I really like that there's going to be an access door from the building directly outside. At least that's what I thought that I saw there, so that people could have almost direct access to Doctors Run Park. But I'd like to also add that on that side of the facade that is on 12th Street, I didn't see any balconies, whereas we do have some balconies that are facing the mini park. And I would really like to see some balconies so that those people that do have apartments or condos, whatever, on 12th Street will be able to enjoy the nature even more from the park, Doctors Run Park. Then from there, I did want to mention, from the main lobby, you go into, there's a bike room, which sounds like it's going to be great. It's wonderful access, but it seems like there's a hallway that goes around the perimeter of the bike room on the back side and the side. And in that little hallway, it looks like there are windows. I was wondering if there's a way to put some windows also in the bike room, so natural light could be available in the bike room for those people. So it's not just this dark, empty or dark packed space. But anyway, those are my comments. And overall, I like the presentation very much. Thank you.
Thanks, Ed. Thanks for those comments on the clarification about the mini park size. I was just pulling up our latest plans. The proposed mini park area is 12,283 square feet. As of our last submission, that's about 0.28 acres. And we'll take a look at your comment about windows in the bike room. If I have to guess, that's a required corridor for egress, and I don't know if you're able to extend the bike room out there to introduce windows, but we can take a look.
Well, I don't mean to extend the bike room. I mean, can we just put windows in that internal wall that would, I guess it would be the back of the bike room would have a wall, and then you're saying there's an egress hallway. Can you put just something that light can transfer through, glass or some sort of transparent surface, so that natural light could get into the bike room? I'm not saying open up the bike room to that hallway.
So to answer your question about that is an egress corridor, so it has to be a rated enclosure, so it wouldn't allow for windows, but we could provide windows into that alleyway space, so it could get some natural daylight into the bike room at that spot.
That would be great. Thank you.
Linda, do you want to go ahead?
Thank you. Slide 9, the loading area from Columbia Pike. How do they get in and out? Do they need to back in from Columbia Pike?
They'll be able, this will be right in, right out loading entrance. They'll be able to turn into the alleyway from Columbia Pike, go inside the building to their loading space, and then I believe Mike Pinkowski, correct me if I'm wrong, they'll be able to kind of like back out into that alley and then head out right onto Columbia Pike.
Okay, right in, right out. Excellent. Okay. The mini park, I just want to confirm that everything is a flat path. So there wouldn't be any challenges for wheelchairs or strollers.
I'll let Dan answer to the slope of some of the internal pathway in the park. As he did mention, there is a lot of grade that we're dealing with at the corner. So we do have an ADA pathway from Columbia Pike near the retail space, but the pathway coming up from the corner does need to have stairs. But Dan, can you confirm kind of the slope interior and those interior walkways is accessible?
Yeah, that's right. So there's no good way to get a ramp down from the corner of George Mason Drive and Columbia Pike. So we have some quick stairs that come in there, but the accessible path would be on Columbia Pike to the corner where the retail meets that, and then all along the front edge until it meets back with George Mason Drive as you're heading south towards Doctor's Run Park. There's
Okay, so
accessible path and no ramps needed. It's all less than 5%.
so there's only one set of stairs. Okay. Slide 18.
We have another little small stair, kind of near the bus stop on George Mason Drive, but just because the ramp would be too long in that space, and it's relatively easy to get to, accessible path.
Is your assessment overall then for the entire park that the majority of the areas are easily traversed by someone using a wheelchair or somebody pushing a stroller?
Definitely, that was a priority of ours.
Good. Okay. Glad to hear that. As usual, Columbia Pike, the terrain and the topography is the challenge for every single project without fail. So that
it brings its unique challenges.
There is something else. So, okay. Slide 18, because that covers a number of different things. Chris, your voice cut in and out a little bit when you were describing the 12th Road side. Is there a screening wall on the east side so that the headlights of cars entering from George Mason would not be shining into the Quebec apartment buildings?
I'm sorry, Linda. So is that you're saying if you're coming down 12th Street, turning into the left?
Turning into the garage, you're heading in off of George Mason, you're heading for the Quebec apartments. Is there a screening wall or something so headlights at night don't?
There isn't anticipated right now. There's quite a bit of grade between the two. So I believe there's going to be, and maybe Vika could answer this, I think there's going to be a retaining wall there. There's also an existing fence line that exists on the Quebec apartments across there, which is probably going to be, will more than likely be rebuilt as part of our project responsibilities if we get permission to do that.
So you don't foresee a problem with headlights shining into the Quebec apartments?
I don't think so, but we'll look at that. We'll study that and make sure that that's not a problem. We're very cognizant of not having headlights going into the.
Generally too, when you turn into the garage, like now the headlights are facing this direction and not directly toward the Quebec apartment. So as the cars come off of 12th Street,
Right.
But as
they'll
they
be turning
turn,
here.
as they turn, they
Yeah.
could. So I think we'll look at that and make sure of that. But I
Yeah.
do believe there's enough grade there change. But maybe Mike can
Okay.
answer.
There is a
Is,
defense noted on the landscape plans. So yeah, we will maintain
okay.
that.
Okay. The trellis along the loading dock, what are you envisioning for that?
We're talking about a sort of a biophilic, punched metal type of screening. I apologize for not having a typology in the presentation, but it would be a screen that would, uh, you know, diffuse the light. We'd like to still have natural daylight in there, so it's just not a hole, especially if you're going down Columbia Pike. It would wouldn't look
Right.
very inviting. So
Sure. Yep.
it would allow some light to come through there, but we would want to also be, we haven't spec'd the lighting in that area, but we want to make sure that that's going to be non-glare or lighting that doesn't, impact the neighbors.
Right. Okay. Sounds good. And is there going to be a wall along the south side of the new 12th Road between the edge of your property and the beginning of Doctor's Run Park? Is there going to be some sort of wall?
No, our improvements end at our property line here in red, and I think Miss Sontag had that slide showing the streetscape
Right.
elements. Yeah, so we're providing the required streetscape on our portion of the property and limiting the improvements there.
So there is no wall on the right as you're entering off of George Mason. There's no wall on your right as you're driving in onto 12th Road.
No, we will not be installing a wall on the county's park property.
Okay. On the east side, slide 33, are these blank walls?
Here, the east elevation.
Right,
Yes,
yes.
this area, and as Chris noted, it's hard to kind of see this in a 2D flat image. We did talk about the parking garage, how that does need to be solid wall to prevent venting and light from leaking out into the garage. And you do have some areas where there's no fenestration here with these units. We're not on an RBL here, so that's why you'll see that different fenestration type. Chris, I don't know if you wanted to add.
And it should have articulated this too. The base of it is a different material. It's actually brick. You'll see a line that goes across there, and then above that, it's going to be a cementitious paneling material. We're going to study breaking that up a little bit more. So this facade doesn't have the shadows on it too. I should apologize for that. We do have an image with it now, with the shadows. So it does have quite a lot of articulation. And I would say too that the landscaping that's going to occur in the first courtyard space on the right-hand side, and then the other two will be obviously visible, and that'll help break up the massing. The other thing you'll notice is that that the Quebec apartments are not parallel to this facade. They actually are on angles, 45-degree angles, so it creates their own kind of green spaces between them. So there's quite a bit of screening. I don't believe there's been a conversation with the adjacent owners yet, but we'll certainly engage them in the future.
Have you considered some sort of artistic design on the garage wall? Just because it's going to be fairly extensive, but just some sort of artistic, not in terms of the construction materials, but literally some sort of artistic design. I
Yes.
understand what you're saying about the articulation, so you get visual, it won't be an absolutely solid wall, but some sort of
Right.
something artistic.
Yes, and we're studying that right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
The last thing I've got is slide 35, the main corner of the building. Have you considered some sort of color curve or angle, another spot of color, because you've got the spot of color at the residential lobby.
Mhm.
Have you thought about something that would just run, across multiple stories of the building, and also, it could be curved or an angle, just something that's a pop of color, since
Uh-huh.
that is going to be a distinctive corner as you're coming down from Centro and from the Pike.
Mhm.
It's coming down a hill. So, any little extra artistic something that's pleasing to catch the eye.
We hadn't, but we could take a look at that, and see. We are hesitant to pop it too much, I guess,
Right.
because of the biophilic aspect of the park and the rest of it. We don't really want to take too much away from that. What you'll
Sure.
see on the left-hand side is it's a more of a towering element, and it's more of a identifier on Columbia Pike. We're kind of putting the emphasis on that. And the reason for that, Linda, is because the long-term views coming down Columbia Pike, that's going to be quite prominent. And we wanted to
Right.
catch people's eye there. But at the same time, to emphasize that and to emphasize the interior entrance to the main portion of the building, if we add too much emphasis on this other corner, we felt that it diminished those two elements, right? So then there's too much competition. There's too many competing elements.
I think it would
Okay.
detract to part of what Chris and his team have done here, like really broken down this facade along South George Mason Drive with these different expressions. And as he mentioned, adding in another element or feature here would diminish the expression here at the corner as it relates to this piece in the middle and then going down. So I think we've tried to create kind of three clear facades with those interruptions required by the code.
Okay. That's all I've got. Thank you.
Thanks, Linda.
Thanks. We'll go to Glenn, followed by Michelle.
Hello, thank you. Appreciate it. Appreciate everyone's time on this. I'll try to be quick. I have three kind of comments, points. If we could just bring up the site plan to start with. This is one that I know no one can do anything about, but I just wanted to kind of point this out. So as you're coming up from South George Mason, you come up towards the north, and we have this little pocket park or mini park. And I know this is part of the master plan and it's all been figured out, and it does a really nice job of kind of opening up a view corridor. And as you come around the curve, you have this beautiful view corridor, and it really emphasizes the gas station, right? So it's like right in front of you. And so the point is twofold. One, that mini park, I think the flora really does need to be sort of substantial, so it doesn't feel like you're really just highlighting the Liberty Station across the street there and the little retail. And second, of course, that would be a great site to really develop. And matter of fact, I think you saw the little sort of emerald necklace potential of moving from the park north up by 8th Street and connecting it all the way down here. If the Liberty site could ever be a park, that would be a great little emerald necklace opportunity. Obviously, probably never going to happen, but that would be the really chance to really make that mini park part of that sequence. But I do think that the landscape itself, the density of that landscape will be important, so that you don't really feel like you're kind of highlighting the Liberty gas station there. So that's one. So I have two questions, 2 points about in the public realm and one in the private. The second one, I'll sort of jump ahead of where I thought I would go, but 35, let's go back to that image since we just had it up, slide 35. And I don't want to be the architect that's commenting on the architecture, but if I see this one, I mean, all the massing and all the breakdown, we get all of that. That's all really very strategic and sensible and all that. But if I look at this one, the top story looks really tall. I'm not sure if there's some piece of penthouse or there's a large parapet or something that's hiding the mechanical units. But for me, it really feels like, especially with those terraces up there, that this little rooflet over here, it'd be nice if that wrapped around and really gave this building a top. It feels like the top kind of washes away into the sky to me. And I'd love to see that top, that kind of roof piece. It would also give shade to those terraces at certain points, right? Those terraces are kind of right out in the open now. And maybe a little shade would be good. And I just feel like this building needs a top. It's a very tall top story to my eye. And then third, last one, if we can go to 33, a couple more. I think we also looked at that slide a second ago. And my only comment here is not about the wall and all of that. That was addressed. I do think, I feel like the courtyards themselves, the proportions of courtyards are really important. And the big one has pretty good proportions, a little bit taller than wide. The middle one with the pool is pretty nice. But this one feels, you're not seeing my mouse, but the one on the left, the furthest south, feels a little tight and a little bit mean to me. And I just guess what I would say. And I know the size of the apartments and all of that and the number of square feet, and I get all of that. But anything we could do to relieve that a little bit, pull it back, do something, get a little more volume on that one. That one looks tight to me from the private amenities side. So those are my comments, and appreciate all the time and effort that these projects take, and you're staying up till 9 o'clock to talk to us about it.
Thanks, Glenn.
Thanks, Glenn. Michelle?
I have just kind of a clarifying question. If you could pull up like whatever site plan you have of the park, the plaza, or the park on the corner. I'm sorry, I didn't write down the slide number like everyone else did, but I just had a question. I just couldn't tell from either the site plan that I was looking online or this, like how you get from the bus stop. Can you walk straight from the bus stop to the building entrance without like walking through plantings? Like I can't see. I know there's like those little steps, but then I don't know how you get. I just can't quite see it, and I couldn't see it on any of the plans. And so I'm specifically talking, about the George Mason bus stop, but also, I guess both of the bus stops, rather than, because people are going to get off the bus and just walk a straight line to the entrance, whether you have a path there or not. And so, I was just wondering if you had a path.
Right. As Dan noted, and he can chime in too, there's quite a bit of grade drop here. So looking at the Columbia Pike side, coming from this bus stop, your paths into the park are either to walk around to the retail plaza. This is going to be too tall for you to kind of come up into the park, or to come up through this stairwell here. On George Mason Drive, you could go left and up through this stair here into the park, or go right and come back up around. Dan, I don't know if the grades here align for anyone to be able to come through this pathway or not at this location.
We did. There's quite a large requirement for trees in the park. So to kind of fit everything in and provide enough soil area, and also adjacent planting to really make it feel like a park. Like it's not a streetscape where you just have, like trees and you have a gap between it. So we kind of chose, the access points. We really need to, for the George Mason Drive bus stop, you really have to kind of go around to the right. And we use that sign as kind of your pivot point to walk around it into the park. It's, it signifies the park. You could always, come off the George Mason bus drive, come up to the left a little bit, and we have a little pinch point between the two pathways, between the sidewalk and the pathway in the park. And it was kind of that diagonal that would head up towards the primary building entrance or the retail. So we kind of chose to, along that desire line, if you will, to locate the stair there. We think people will come off of, say cross Columbia Pike and George Mason Drive. They'll want to get down. So as soon as we could pass the existing utilities that are there, we provided a little stair down into the plaza. And but otherwise, people will use the Columbia Pike sidewalk past the bus stop to enter the plaza there. One thing that's nice about the Columbia Pike, that the actual bus stop is where the bus doors open, is closer to that retail plaza. So if you were on Columbia Pike and you got off the bus there, you'd pretty much open right into that plaza, which is where that view we have that looked into there. So
and so the George Mason bus stop, like if you're in a wheelchair, you have to wheel down, right? I know, I get, because
to
there's
go
probably
down and
not
up.
length for a ramp. And then
Mhm.
if you're not wheeling down, your fastest point is just going, is it up or down those little stairs there, right? And then
down,
it's like
Mhm.
paved in there, or permeable,
Yeah, this
or
is a
whatever
pathway right
Yeah.
here. Yeah.
thanks. You know, people just walk where they're going to walk, whether or not there's a path
Right.
there or not.
Yeah, we're heavily planted, and we're trying to get kind of meet the county's goals of pollinators and natives
Yeah.
and stuff. We really do want
Yeah.
it to feel well
Yeah.
integrated, and kind of the
It's
point that we also want to kind of downplay liberty.
Yeah.
They're part of the form-based code. You were supposed to have more of an open view into these parks and not have a lot of tall plantings. So we've kind of done the best we can to use low planting, but also make it feel full and give enclosure to that park.
Yeah. I mean, plantings aren't going to live if people are just walking on them. So I just want to make sure you're thinking about the desire lines. That's all. It sounds like you've built that in a little bit. Eric, I just have two more questions. One is, was there discussions, I don't know if this is Olivia or the team, about a screening on those giant mechanical units on the corner? Which is like the main face on that intersection. I was just curious about it. I didn't realize how giant those were.
Yeah, we have been in discussions with the applicant about that. So we're looking at options for planting, at least on the mini park facing side. But we are trying to balance low level plantings, which are usually which are allowed in these mini park areas, compared to some of the larger hedges that would be, taller shrubs that would be required to actually fully screen those areas. So we'll be working with our urban forestry team on something that's appropriate for that area.
Okay. I personally would like to see some screening around those things, whatever it may be. The third thing, I actually just had a question about, and it's a little adjacent, I guess, to the permit itself, but about your retail area. Do you have a plan for how to make that work? Like, are you just delivering a cold dark shell and hoping someone will come in and build it out for you? Or like, are you doing, we talked with one of the developers a couple of weeks ago here in Penrose about their retail areas and their plans, and they had a whole idea about how to actually make it work instead of leaving it empty like so much of the retail on the Pike. And so I was just wondering, curious about your thinking about the retail and how to make it active.
Sure. The goal here is, as with most projects, is to get that retail space leased up as soon as possible. The developer has an incentive to do that, right? So that it doesn't sit there vacant for a long time. So they're thinking about what that space might be and programming now. We don't really have any updates for you on what kind of retail will go there. There'll be continued discussions, up until the point where it's ready to lease, but they are thinking about that. And they do have a consultant on board. Additionally, the form-based code, use permit conditions require us to market that space for retail and to work with Arlington Economic Development as well. So we're all kind of working together to make that a successful space.
So I guess my comment as part of that would just be to consider having, building in some of the amenities that you need for, like, I don't know if any of those are big enough for a restaurant space or not, but some of those exhaust facilities, or not just a shell that someone has to come and spend all their money in building out. But I understand that's a little adjacent to the permit itself. I think, thanks, Eric. I think that's all I had.
No, these are good comments. You sort of took some of my questions. I mean, I think you really put your finger on it, which is, Michelle, which is when we've seen some of these form-based code projects, Centro is going to be is catty corner, so it's just an obvious reference point. I don't think it's not been a failure. It's leased up by no means, but I wouldn't say it's been a smashing success with its retail either. And I wonder if part of that was sort of maybe not understanding or just a not congruence between like what the vision was from the development like perspective versus what the neighborhood that it would live in actually was, and like thinking about the customers it would serve. And that development kind of bothers me because just the way that they built in Harris Teeter, and it's very far back from the street, and that makes sense. It's very busy, but like there's no purpose to it. Like no, like who would really walk up there, right? And this is a mini park. It's totally different. It's smaller. The grade's different. Like it's not apples to apples at all. But yeah, I mean, I guess I am curious, like you know, what type of retailer would go in there? I mean, that 7-Eleven, which obviously will be coming out as a part of this redevelopment, seems to have done pretty well. And I'm not saying that 7-Eleven, I'm not saying, hey, you should have 7-Eleven come back, but like they seem to have done pretty well. They're definitely serving a market. I've gone there a bunch. It's a great place to pick up milk, right? But I do recognize a lot of our neighbors who are living in Barcroft and nearby do pop over there. And so I would kind of urge you to be thinking about the neighborhood that's already there, because a big purpose of this whole plan was to also serve existing residents as well as new ones. And so obviously, like you'll have a customer base in the folks who live in the building, but like they alone, I don't think can sustain that retail space. So who all is coming, right? And maybe folks drive, maybe they don't. It's kind of a interesting part of the Pike because you don't have a ton of other stuff people are walking to necessarily, other than residential areas, right? And the grade gets pretty steep once you go west. So I just think being really intentional about who may be there. And I do have a question. I'm getting to a question that was commentary, but going back to that mini park, which I think is largely great. I do also share kind of Michelle's concern. It was in the question, but access from that bus stop on George Mason, and then just generally like 12th Street. I am a little concerned with the current design. I think there's almost likely to be some type of desire path that kind of gets carved out by folks walking. I think if the retail is doing well, that's going to happen. Like if that doesn't happen, I think that probably is not great for the retail, because I think if the retail is doing well, it is attracting folks from across the street and maybe coming across 12th, coming from 12th across George Mason. And so I guess I understand, and I hear you on the requirements for the trees from the form-based code, but like I just think that's a massively large missed opportunity to not intentionally think about how are we drawing traffic from 12th Road across. Like there's a lot of people that live there and are gonna live there. There's just only so many you're gonna get from that building. There's only so many from Quebec. And then outside of that, I mean, it's people driving, right? And maybe some people come on the bus, but being realistic, right? If you're gonna get foot traffic, it's gonna be from that immediate kind of Barcroft area, which is right there. So I think forcing them to either go to the corner or walk around, like I don't know that that's a great approach if you're going to locate the retail on the corner, right? And again, I don't expect you to know what the retail is, but I think if you make it inconvenient, it's then folks aren't going to be driving the retail, and you're going to want to drive the retail because you're going to want them to continue to lease the space. So I really urge you to kind of re-examine who it is you're drawing into that space. I do have a question. Maybe it's for you, Olivia, or maybe I think Rob's on the call, but I feel like I had asked at one point about 12th, about their potentially like what would happen with 12th. At this point, there aren't any plans for a crosswalk at 12th and George Mason, are there?
We envision that there will be a crosswalk with the redevelopment to the west.
Okay.
Actually, we envision that it'll be fully signalized.
Oh, fantastic. So, I mean, that really gets to what I'm talking about, which is like, I just see folks Like look, I'm at that 7-Eleven probably twice a week. And again, this is not 7-Eleven. Like I get it. It's a new building, but I think they're already crossing without a crosswalk there. And so I just think we need to think about where they're already going to be going, and we want to attract them in, right? Folks from Barcroft there. Is there going to be any, as far as other folks, is there going to be any opportunity for public parking in the garage? Are there any public spaces for folks using the retail?
Yes, sorry, I had to unmute. Yes, we will be providing retail parking inside the garage. If you give me just a second to find that. So well, in the garage, the form-based code requires we park the units at 1.125 spaces per unit. That results in about 293 parking spaces for the residential, and the retail has to be parked at 1 space per 1,000 square feet. And so we have just under 7,000 square feet. So we have 7 spaces for the retail in the garage. And then we also have those pickup and drop off spaces and dedicated parking on-street parking spaces along South George Mason Drive as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, and we've never really figured out pick up and drop off in Arlington. Nobody's really, it's always an issue. I think that's fine. I mean, the current lot, obviously it is what it is, but it basically parks like 7 or 8 cars safely before it starts to become like unsafe in that surface parking lot for the 7-Eleven. And so again, I think that sort of goes towards my point in, if they're doing enough business, they're doing enough business without having spaces for like 20 cars, which means they're driving a lot of foot traffic or bus traffic. And so we've talked about the buses, but I think it's the foot traffic that we really want to be deliberate, because if we can't drive the foot traffic, I think that retail space really, really struggles, which is why I think there's been some challenges with Centro, because they're getting a lot of folks driving to Harris Teeter, but if they're not driving to Harris Teeter, like, are they really driving unless they've got an appointment at Orange Theory or one of the other spaces, right? I would imagine you guys want to drive more casual foot traffic too, generally, if you have a retail space there. And so that's why I'm saying, just with that park, if maybe some modifications can be made, that would be helpful. All right, I'm off that soapbox, don't worry. I'll go back to Glenn, and then let's wrap this up.
Sorry, I will point out that Orange Theory doesn't exist there anymore. They're gone.
Okay, well, okay, sorry. Whatever.
I didn't have a comment. Sorry, thank you.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, I'm not seeing any of the other hands raised. So I think let's move on, because I'm about to break my promise. It's 8:58. So thank you so much, Lauren and the team, for the presentation. That was really informative, and we'll look forward to seeing next steps. Okay, at this time, Olivia, has anybody signed up for public comment? Thanks, Chris.
No one signed up for public comment.
Okay.
And I don't believe we have any members of the public in attendance. I believe they're all from the applicant team.
Right. Sounds good. Okay. Do we have any development updates?
Yes,
I just wanted to say thanks, everybody. We appreciate your feedback. We'll take a look into that. Thank you for your time tonight. Have a good
thanks. Always good to see you. Take care.
Thank you. So I'll cover development updates just very quickly. So you may be aware, the COVID-19 extension that was granted to site plans and use permits over the past couple years, they've decided not to provide that extension again this June. So in anticipation of that, we did reach out to any site plan applications, or in our case, form-based code use permit applicants who have use permits that will be expiring at the end of June. So we did have 2 applications that were subject to that. One was Pike West and one was Rappahannock Coffee. Unfortunately, both of those applicants have elected not to extend those use permit applications. So effective as of the end of June, both of those use permits will expire. So we'll keep you updated. If we hear anything else about those specific sites, or any new use permit applications that may come forward in the future for those locations. In more positive news, we did just receive an application for the Fillmore Gardens shopping center. They filed a new form-based code use permit for that site. It's, we're very early in the review process, just getting a chance to start taking a look at the proposal there. But it's largely similar to the previous Elliott use permit. They're proposing about 260 units with ground floor retail, but in this case, no grocer on that site. So we, again, early in the review process, we don't have an AWG date or anything set for that item yet, but we'll definitely keep you updated. And those are the updates I have for projects, but happy to take questions on those or others if you have any.
Olivia, I just have a quick question. The Fillmore plans, are those online? Are those like the plans that they submitted? Are those posted?
Yes,
Okay.
they are public. I can
Can you send us like the project number or whatever?
yes, we haven't set up the web page for that one yet,
Okay.
but I'll send out a link to the
Thanks.
plans.
Thank you.
I
Great.
see. Oh. Linda?
Any update on the Bank of America site or the Exxon site?
Not on the Bank of America site. That one, we have been in contact with the applicant just to remind them their application will expire come, I believe, February of next year. So they are aware of that and are planning to file an extension.
Okay. Great. Glad to hear that. Okay, that's what I was afraid of, that they would expire and that goes away as well. I'm glad to hear that. Anything on the Exxon?
The applicant has reached out and wants to start re-engaging, but no updates yet on any specific timelines or changes to their proposal.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Sorry, I thought of another project. The 9th Street townhomes, is that just kind of in the review process? Is that moving forward still by chance?
Yes, that one is moving forward. I believe they're going through their phasing plan with our Department of Environmental Services and their civil engineering plan. So that is underway.
Thanks.
Okay. We've dwindled quite a bit here. All right. Well, thanks, Olivia. That is the end of our agenda. Thanks, everyone. We will maybe see you in, I guess July, probably more likely, Olivia. Is that what we're thinking?
We'll be back in June to look at the phase development use permit application for Barcroft, and it's unlikely that we'll have any items for July.
Sounds good. All right. Everybody take care. Stay dry. Thanks, Olivia.
Yeah, thank you.
Take
Good
care.
night.
Good night.
Okay, thank you. Good night.